This time it's 5 affordable European classics. Now when you think of European motorcycles of the classic era, affordable is not a phrase that springs to mind. You usually think of Ducati 750 SS's, Guzzi Le Mans Mark 1s, or Laverdas or MV Augustas, that kind of thing, or BMWs. But there are some more affordable bikes, and here are 5 of them. Moto Guzzi V35 or V50s. With their hair and head design, these small capacity Guzzis were an all-new design from the ground up by Tonti, the man who designed the frame for the Le Mans and the V7s. The very first versions of the machines were in fact built at the Innocenti factory rather than Mandello dell'Ario like all other Guzzis, and indeed earlier on there were some reliability and build quality issues. The Guzzi moved fairly quickly and in 1979 introduced the V50 and V35 Mark II. These featured a number of improvements and were in fact the first Guzzis to use electronic ignition, although this system wasn't a complete success because when the Mark III came out they'd reverted back to points. And the Mark III does feature a number of improvements over the previous models around braking, the chassis and build quality also, so it's definitely the one to go for if you're really after a V50. The Mark III was introduced in 1981 and featured the same 490cc short-stroke engine, although power was now increased to 47 horsepower claimed at 7,500 rpm, with its 350 stablemate now producing a claimed 34 horsepower. Alongside the standard models, Guzzi would also introduce a series of sporting variants, and these were the 350 Imola and the 500 Monza. 350 Imola made about 36 horsepower and the Monza around 48. Now of course while this makes them only moderate performers next to say the Ducati Panther, they were extremely lightweight, in fact the lightest in class, and few would deny the brilliance of Tonti's chassis. And in fact an early review in Motorcycle magazine, the road tester said that it was probably the best handling motorcycle on the planet at that time. High praise indeed for what is a truly great chassis. And there's no doubt that these bikes make a great first classic, easy to work on, pretty reliable, excellent spares availability because they still make the thing, and of course, Italian style. MZ's ES, TS and ETZ range. MZ, or Motorenwerk Japar, grew from the range of the DKW plant in Saxony, but the beginning of MZ really comes in 1949 when DKW officially moves to Ingolstadt in Bavaria in the western part of Germany. The factory in Japar was left behind and is taken over by the East German government. And so it was in 1950 the production of the RT125 begins at the Japar factory. In 1952 they follow this up with the BK350. This is a flat twin shaft drive 2-stroke and is more or less based on 2 RT125 cylinders. And in 1962 the company releases the ES125 and 150. The machines are still loosely based on the RT, but there's a gradual movement away from that design to a more evolved motorcycle. And with a larger 250 version to follow, the company develops an interest in competition, entering Grand Prix in the 125 capacity, but also having great success in the International 6-day trial, which they won in 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, they off in 68, but they won again in 69, with their last win coming in 1987. And in Grand Prix, Walter Carden, their chief race engineer, would make use of knowledge gained whilst developing pulse jets during the war to develop the expansion chamber exhaust, a device which effectively turns the 2-stroke into a resonance engine, and therefore much more efficient. Groundbreaking work, famously stolen by the Japanese. On the road though, in the late 60s the company introduced the ES range. Best known of the range was the Trophy, with its bizarre front end and very unusual, very Eastern Bloc styling, which somehow kind of works today. And later in the 70s this model was replaced by the TS, with its slightly more conventional styling, dominated by that large chrome panelled petrol tank. Later TS models would feature the all-horizontal finned engine, that kind of slices of bread layered up together, and a disc brake. This model would later be replaced by the ETZ, which had slightly less interesting styling and things, slightly more conservative, but did include auto loop system. And there's no doubt that these are not performance machines, but they are good, solid and reliable. and are definitely fitted with lots of nice touches which makes them really good for use as a commuter bike. But the one area where these bikes do suffer isn't really anything to do with themselves, it's the class system, particularly in Britain. People tend to look down on MZs as working class get you to work bikes. But that's not a bad thing, that's what they were designed to do, and it's what they're great at. The Jawa 350 Parallel Twins. Jawa was formed by one František Janeček in 1929 as an arms manufacturing business in the former Czechoslovakia. However, later that year, Janeček would take over the former Wanderer factory, which was a German motorcycle manufacturer. And this gave the company its name. It was Janeček Wanderer, Jawa. In October of that year, the company produced its first motorcycle. This was a 4-cylinder 500 of around 18 horsepower. But of course, the worldwide reception of the early 30s meant that it was not a great time to be producing a large capacity motorcycle. So in 1932 they introduced a 175 model. And this new machine was highly successful, selling 3,000 units in the first year alone. And the machine would remain in production until 1946. Post-war, the company would return with a 350 and 250cc two-strokes. These were roughly based on the 175. There was also a 500cc overhead cam unit. And it's during the 1950s that exports of the 250 and 350 two-strokes began to more than 120 countries around the globe. Into the 60s, the company would continue to develop its 350 two-stroke. There was even an automatic version developed. And of course the California model that you can see here with its very nice chrome tank. But the company was simply not well enough funded to develop machines at the kind of pace that the Japanese could, so they began to struggle as the 60s turned into the 70s. But somehow production of these 350 two-strokes would continue, with their clever gear change come kickstart lever and all. And in fact, it's a bike still available today. The chrome tap bikes of the 50s command the highest prices, but the 70s bikes can still be picked up for pretty good money. So if you like a machine that lays down its own smokescreen, this could be the perfect bike for you. CZ175. The CZ factory was established in fact as a branch of the Skoda Works in 1919 in Czechoslovakia. The company had been initially set up primarily for the manufacture of arms, but also caused a major downturn in arms requirements after the end of the First World War. But by 1929, the major downturn in the world economy left the company scanning around looking for new business opportunities, and this would lead them into the production of bicycles, later powered bicycles and full-on motorcycles, and then logically into car manufacture. However, in post-war Europe, the company quickly realised that what was required was cheap, economical transport, and so once again moved back into motorcycle manufacture. Initially with mopeds, but then into the 1950s with scooters and small capacity motorcycles. The 1960s would see the introduction of the 455-250 and its 175cc stablemate. These were indeed elegantly styled little motorcycles with their chrome panel tanks and red or black with pinstripe paint jobs. The engine used, of course, was a single-cylinder air-cooled two-stroke with piston-ported induction. These machines are indeed the most iconic of all CZs and are, without a doubt, the most collectible today. In 1963, using just a 263cc machine, a CZ would be the first two-stroke motorcycle to win an FIM 500cc Grand Prix. World motocross titles would of course follow, and this would lead the company in the development of enduro machines such as the 175 Trail that you can see here. These machines were robust, advanced for the time, and very capable machines in what today we would call the dual sport category. But by the 70s things were becoming increasingly difficult for CZ. The European motorcycle market was contracting fairly aggressively, and what market there was increasingly occupied by advanced Japanese machines. And this meant that largely the machines were sold in Britain per se, very much on price alone, which is somewhat unfortunate because in Britain's rather class-ridden society, cheap bikes are often derided and ridiculed for the simple reason that they are cheap and affordable. And this meant that unfortunately, unless you were in the poorer areas, these machines were largely ignored by the bike-buying public, which is a great shame because these were cleverly engineered machines with a fascinating history behind them. Ducati's air-cooled SS range. Whenever I said Ducati Supersport, your mind immediately is going to go back to those bevel drive bikes of the 70s. But perhaps it shouldn't. Those bikes are expensive and are rarely seen on an actual road. During the 70s, Ducati realised they needed a small twin engine. They had initially developed a 350 and 500 parallel twin, but this for various reasons was not commercially successful. And so Fabio Taglioni was allowed to get on and design the bike they'd wanted to in the first place. And this was the Panther 500. It was a development of the 1973 Grand Prix races, and while the Panther was still an air-cooled L-twin, the Panther's overhead camshaft was driven by a toothed belt rather than the bevel drive of the earlier machines, and this was considerably cheaper to manufacture. Production started in 1980 and was soon followed by a 681 and a 650 in 1983. Also in 1983 came a race version of the 650 developed for the TT1 class for 750s, and it's the chassis design for this bike which would form the basis for the later SS models. Starting with the earlier 1980s 750 Sport and then leading into the SS models which were introduced in 1988. The SS can be divided into two basic histories. The first models, or square headlamps, were available as a 350, 400, 600, 750 and 900 models. And the chassis of these bikes is probably near in general geometry to the original Racer, and you can really tell this on the road, because you immediately get the impression this is not a bike that likes to go slowly. Potter around and the engine and chassis feel horrible, go quickly and the whole thing comes together. The later models featured more curvaceous styling, plus better chassis which was easy to handle, and an engine that was fuel injected and a bit more user friendly. But the styling on the later bikes is generally less popular. Personally I like it, I think it looks fairly cool, but a lot of people just don't. As a consequence, these bikes can be an absolute bargain. Well, by Ducati standards at least. So, what other bikes or collections of bikes would you like to see as feature? Maybe you got a bike we can use for a test ride. Either way, get in touch below. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.